This meeting is being recorded.
All right, and we are in chapter 37 of I Am That, and the chapter's name is Beyond Pain and Pleasure, There is Bliss. Right, and why do we use that word bliss? Well, interestingly enough, bliss is native to you. It doesn't require any maintenance. There's nothing that causes it. It is your nature. And because of that, oddly enough, you know how the mind tends to filter out things that are constants. You know, if you've got a steady fan noise in your room, your mind tunes it out. If you smell a flower 5 times in a row, by the fifth time, you can't smell the flower anymore. And so the mind, for whatever reason, filters out things that are constant, which is one of the major reasons that enlightenment is so difficult. Because enlightenment is our native state. That's what we are. That's Satchit Ananda. And if we could keep our sense of self in the shrine of the heart, in the unchanging within ourselves, that's all that needs to happen. We could become aware of that bliss, aware of that love, aware of that wisdom that is native to our being. But when you get pulled out of it into mind, the mind is the world of change. And it's constantly flashing and dancing and singing and making all kinds of wonderful and terrible noises. And so that you're very interested in there. And you can no longer hear because that same mind is filtering out what you are. It's filtering out that steady sense of bliss within you and allowing you to feel these ups and these downs and these highs and lows. It filters out that sense of pure love within you and attaches it to ego so that it's only metered out in small pieces to deserving folks. And you're one of those folks in that puzzle. It gives you love when it thinks you deserve it, and it withholds it from you when it thinks you deserve it. You know, that's why when you have a rather unsuccessful spiritual day, when you go sit in the shrine, you're just not in the mood. It's because of the mind, which holds your karma, is preventing you from experiencing God in your nature, God in yourself. And so this is why we need grace. This is why all the paths, even Advaita, you'll hear in this path here of knowledge that occasionally Sri Nisargadatta will use the word grace in there. And of course, Ramakrishna, made scrambled eggs of the different paths. And so for him, bhakti jnana is no problem at all, or jnana bhakti both ways. I love the description that Swamiji gives. Swamiji said that Ramakrishna was all bhakti on the outside and pure jnana on the inside. And he said, I'm the opposite. I'm all jnana on the outside, but pure bhakti on the inside. And so, which is wonderful, because this is the new teaching, really, or fresh teaching attributed to Sri Ramakrishna, was this willingness to borrow, let the paths mix together and see them as a matter of emphasis and not a matter of absolutism. So if you're a jnani, it's not that you're not allowed to have bhakti at all. He says, no, if you're jnani, be a jnani as your primary, but then support it and inform it with bhakti. That will keep it from being dry, keep it from being lonely, as it were. And then he says to the bhaktas, he says the same thing. He says, inform your bhakti with jnana, because you tend toward not fascism. What's the word I'm looking for? Extremism, fundamentalism. Because the lover always wants to believe that that which he loves is the most beautiful partner in the room, right? My wife, my husband is more beautiful or more handsome than yours, and that's the problem. And that's why all these religions, who are supposed to have love as their primary focus in life, have fallen into egoism and believed that their religion is the best and only. And Rama Vivekananda warns us about that in the very first, I think it's the first paragraph of Bhakti Yoga, where he says, now be careful, devotion tends to create fanatics. And so that's why we keep our jnana in our pocket, tie our jnana into our dhoti, as Ramakrishna says. All right. So he's having this wonderful conversation with this devotee, Sri Nisargadatta is. And the last thing he tells the questioner, he says, don't be childish. And he's, when the childish went, and he's talking about, a spiritual practice. And the questioner referred to it as brainwashing, and he says, you call it brainwashing, I call it yoga. You must not be compelled to think the same thoughts again and again. And this is what we do. It's the nature of Maya, not you, Ms. Chatterjee, but it's the nature of Maya to go in cycles, to repeat, right, over and over and over again. And of course, another one of my favorite little things is the reason for that. Vivekananda says the reason everything goes in cycles and circles in the creation is it's the only way that God can represent his infinity in the finite, because a circle alone has no beginning and no end. And so everything goes in circles as an expression of that, which I just love. So he's saying, it's called yoga, not brainwashing. Stop it with your mental cycles. Become aware. That's why we want to become aware inside. That's why we want to pay attention. And that's why we're constantly asked to discern. Ramakrishna says in all the paths, constant discernment is necessary, because otherwise you just become a passenger in your own mind, and your mind will just ride you through the cycles. You'll do well for, what are some of the cycles? You do well for 2 or 3 days, then you have a bad day, and then you crumble the next day, and then the next day you're repenting and trying to recover, and then you have 3 more good days, and then the same event happens again, and then again, and then again, and then again, and we do this for 60 years, and we wonder, gosh, why am I not getting anywhere? You're not discerning. You haven't been aware that you've been in a wash cycle with an on button stuck, right? So it's just taking you around and around. And so when he tells him not to break out of that cycle, he says, well, that's easier said than done. And Maharaj gets very direct. He's not going to take that nonsense. He says, don't be childish. It's easier to change than to suffer. Grow out of your childishness. That is all. And now the questioner does a very dangerous thing that's very easy for Vedantists to do. Suddenly he pulls in a bit of high Vedanta, high philosophy, at a level that he's not living at, right? That he's not really believing at or knowing at. And he says, such things are not done, they happen, right? I'm not the doer. So how can I not be childish? And how can I, grow out of these cycles? And so Maharaj doesn't correct him because it's true. And so he can't tell the guy it's not true, but he's got to bring the guy down a little bit. He says, everything happens all the time, but you have to be ready for it. Right? He says readiness is ripeness, right? Thakur is always talking about ripening the ego, right? So that he uses that when the coconut's green, you can't separate anything. That means when you haven't done the discernment and you haven't studied your inner world, everything in there just is a mush, nothing separated. You don't know what anything is. You think you're all of it. And so that's why you get stuck in body-mind. But he's saying no, readiness, which means being alert, which means paying attention, which means to be in that constant state of discernment. So, and that very important task, I can't believe it took me over 20 years to realize how important a knowledge of your inner world is. It's not just closing your eyes and saying your mantra. It's going in there and sussing out what is in here. What is my inner world composed of? When I'm thinking, become aware that you're thinking, and then become aware that you're watching your thought, that you're not actually the one thinking, that the mind is just an organ, that secretes thought. Every thought comes out of the previous thought, and those thoughts get pulled up out of memory by sensations that are coming in through the senses. Don't know that up here. It's useless up here. Useless as a thought. Absolutely useless. Know it as an experience of your being, so that when you see thinking, you know that you're looking at thinking, and you know that you only select thoughts that your karma allows you to select and identify with. Become aware of the influence of your karma, your karma is what gives sensations importance above all the other sensations that are happening at that moment, and delivers that to the mind, and then the mind pulls up memory. Right? And when memory comes up, it attaches expectation to it, and boom, that's a desire. Right? You fulfill that desire, you've completed the cycle that has trapped you for all of these years. Become aware of this. That's how we stand ready. That's what he's talking about here. Everything is happening all the time. All this is happening always, but you must be ready. Readiness is ripeness, right? So that is what Thakur is asking of us. Be ripe. Know your inner world. Be in constant awareness of what's happening in there so that you can stay detached from these trapping cycles that happen constantly that keep you spinning in Maya's washing machine, as it were. You do not see the real because your mind is not ready for it. See, you can't see the real because you've mixed it in with the mashed potatoes. You know, you can't tell the difference. You've got mind rolling around in there. You've got emotions rolling around in there. You've got the silence of the inner self mashed in with all of that change. And it's just all swirling in there, and you just treat it as a mass, thinking that you're mind. And what can you do? You can't be ready. You can't see God. And you think that God is somewhere else, and you think that something has to be done, something has to be changed, that something has to be worked on, when all that has to happen is you have to know yourself. You have to know, I'm not this mind, I'm not this body, and you have to know what that means. What does it mean to say you're not the mind? You know, you have to suss that out. You have to work that out. What are the consequences of identifying with mind? And what does that mean? It means you identify with thoughts. Well, what does that mean? That means you think you're the one thinking. And so your thoughts are very precious to you because they define you, because they are you. You have to break that cycle. And you can't do it by just saying, oh, I'm not the mind. What good is that? You know, you have to know. And you have to know by going inside and becoming intimately aware with the fact that you watch your thoughts. And by the very fact that you watch your thoughts, they cannot be you. Right? They cannot be you because you're watching them. And then you learn the same thing about the body. The body has to tell you when it's sick. If you were the body, you would intuitively know it already before anything had to be shared or told. But the body has to communicate to you, right? In those ways and say, that's why when I wake up every morning for the last 2.5 weeks, I wake up and the first day every day, I go in there and I'm like, am I healthy yet? You know, oh, are my lungs cleared yet? Oh my God, is there a cough yet? Right? I go through, I do a checklist. If I was the body, I wouldn't have to do a checklist. My goodness, I would know intuitively, intrinsically. But you see, you come to know you're not the body. And by rerunning these cycles of a constant awareness of the inner life of you, the outer life changes of its own accord, because all of this out here is just an expression of what's going on for your imagined you in here, right? In there. It's because of your identity with thoughts that you have a political party. It's your identity with your body that you care so much about a future, you know, that you're wrapped up in a future, wrapped up in a past, you know, that you listen to the stories that belong to the body. I'm getting older, you know, oh, I'm getting sicker, I'm getting unhealthy or whatever. All the stories of body become stories of you if you haven't sorted out the mashed potatoes of your inner world. Right? And all the stories of your mind become you. Oh, I'm happy. Oh, I'm depressed. You know, oh, I'm busy. Oh, I'm whatever, jealous. I'm angry. I've been offended. Actually, offending is the things like offense and annoyed and anger. Those things come as a combination of body mind. You know, when you've become an egoistic entity that contains body mind, right? But is still observed. You can see ego form. You can feel your ego raise its head. It's an amazing thing to become aware of. It's intricately beautiful, but dastardly in its effect, because that's where road rage comes from. You know, that's why people slap each other, is because of egoism. So this is what he's talking about. Be ripe, which means be ready, which means be constantly aware of your inner world, so that you're not pulled in to the mashed potatoes, so that you can stand aloof and know the proper action, not based on a series of thoughts, but based on the inspiration of inner wisdom that you are now aware of. Because when you know that you're not the mind, it tends to quiet, because it only makes noise because me and mine has been mixed in there, right? When that me and mine is removed, Your mind returns to its still pure state, or close to it. But it comes to that pure state, which is Brahman. That's the company. That's the presence that Brother Lawrence was always talking about. You become aware of that presence, of this beautiful, transcendent stillness, the peace that passes understanding, which isn't separate from you. That is what you are, right? When you're mind, you're all the conditions of mind. When you're body, you're all the states of body. But when you're yourself, you're in a transcendent state of peace that passes understanding. And from there, you observe the world. And from there, you act from the access you have to a spontaneous wisdom that is equally you, as much as the peace is equally you. So be ready. You must not be, right? So grow up, blah, 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 where are we? Readiness is ripeness. You do not see the real because your mind is not ready for it. You haven't done this discernment. You're not watching what's going on. You're not aware of what's affecting you. You don't see your attachments. You don't understand what they're causing inside because you've never watched one form. You've never been aware enough inside to see an attachment form and to understand how that happens and why it's a bad thing. What does an attachment do? Well, it pulls you out of your transcendent peace. It pulls you out of your inherent spontaneous wisdom, and it makes you crazy. Literally, it makes you crazy. So the questioner says, well, if reality is my real nature, how can I ever be unready? Right? Well, because you've never identified with reality. You've identified only with the constant change, right? You're not identified with the reality. What is the reality? That which is unchanging in you. That I am. That's the reality. And yes, that's what you are, but you don't pay any attention to it. All of your attention is on the sparkly things that change in mind and body. And so if reality is my real nature, which it is, how can I ever be unready? Well, because you've jumped in to the unreal. You're not living in the real. Maharaj, unready means afraid, right? Because constant change means there's nothing to find security in. And see, that is our big mistake, is because we identify with the constant change, we have to try and build our security in a world where nothing is unchanging, right? How are you ever going to find security in something that can constantly change? One day the stocks are up, one day they're down. One day it's a beautiful day, the next day the town is on fire. You know, one day you've got a job with the government, the next day you don't. One day you're picking strawberries in California, and the next day you're in Guantanamo Bay. It's like, where are you going to find your steadiness in that mess? Where are you going to find any security at all? So you're living in a constant state of fear. Now, why don't we feel that way? Because we ignore that, right? We ignore our fear. We squelch it because we don't have a solution. We don't know how to be secure because we've identified with something unreal. And unreal things don't have a solution. That's why we describe everything as neti. That's the only solution. Pull your head out of the sand. There's no solution to your darkness until you pull your head out of the hole in the ground. Unready means afraid. You are afraid of what you are. Your destination is the whole, but you are afraid that you will lose your identity. This is childishness, clinging to the toys, to your desires and fears, opinions and ideas. Give it all up and be ready for the real to assert itself, right? Be ready for that inspiration. Ooh, when that comes, what a beautiful thing. You know, and we all taste a little bit of it. You know, if you're doing really good practice for a couple of days in a row, you know, every 10 years or so, the stars align, and that happens for all of us. Where we manage to do a great practice for several days in a row. And then what happens? You go in there and you sit in the shrine, and suddenly you're there. Suddenly you just have this wonderful, warm feeling in the heart, and God is so present, and it's so easy to calm down and relax and to be in the presence, right? And so this is all there. So give it all up, right? Pull your attachments out by the root. See the separateness between you and body, you and mind. Become aware of the constant unchanging within you. Identify with that. So get up, give it all up, and be ready for the real to assert itself, because that's what happens. You don't become a lump. When you say not this, not this, not this, everybody always thinks, "Oh, what am I going to just sit on a log and drool? What am I going to do if I do nothing, and if I think nothing?" Right? Because you have forgotten that you are something. You are the I am, and the nature is pure love and pure wisdom. What will you become if you get this? Well, you become a Ramakrishna. You become a Buddha. You become a Rama or a Jesus. You become what is your natural state. Someone who lives through the inspiration, through this assertion of the self itself, right? And it doesn't like body heat. Not something you think about, not something you calculate. It's not something you have to know the cause and effect cycle for, right? It's just what you are. So give it all up and be ready for the real to assert itself. This self-assertion is best expressed in the words I am, right? Which is to say, it's isness. This is the nature of God, the nature of isness, the nature of your existence. You can touch it for a moment. I think anybody can do this. If you just stop right now, just think about existence. Become aware of your existence. Become aware of everything you can be aware of in this moment. Just keep opening and opening and opening. Undoubtedly, if you can do that for just a few seconds, few tens of seconds, you become aware of a bliss. You become aware of the miracle and the mystery and the excitement and the wonder of being. You become aware of what makes a child giggle, of what makes a child just stare in a room, a baby, just sitting there in the crib, wide-eyed, looking at everything. Why? Because he's experiencing existence through a body-mind for the first time ever. And that's the natural state. And that's why Jesus says, unless you become like little children, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. Unless you come to that stillness where you see everything for the first time again, you can't know yourself, because yourself is in a constant state of newness, a constant state of renewal, a constant state of freshness, right? Yeah, beautiful stuff. This self-assertion is best expressed in the words, I am. Nothing else has being. Of this, you are absolutely certain, right? This is the only thing you actually know that doesn't depend on a relative piece of information, right? If you sit there in the shrine, I did this exercise, I've shared it before. It just occurred to me one day in the shrine in San Francisco. I was like, is there anything that I know that isn't dependent on something else? Because I was thinking about the nature of the relative world. In this relative world, nothing has a value until it's compared to something else. That's what makes it relative. And if there is no absolute, that would just collapse in on itself. Nothing could be held separate, because it would be meaningless, right? Attributes in a relative world without an absolute in the center of it are meaningless. Where is the first place that you measure from? The I am. God is that unchanging absolute. And for God is the central pole of the circus tent. From that, everything is measured. The center pole of the circus tent. You take that center pole away and the whole thing collapses in on itself, because everything is relative, which means it's meaningless and non-existent. Very cool stuff. So that's what he's saying here. Nothing else has being without that I am, without that unchanging absolute from which the original measure is made. Of this, you are absolutely certain. This is the only thing that you know that is not dependent on anything else that you know, because it is non-relative. It is absolute. I am. Questioner. I am, of course, but I know also. And I know that I am so-and-so. Oh my goodness. You see how it happens? You see, that's very good. It's good to watch this man's question. He builds his delusion as he goes along. I am, that's what he says, but then I know. Well, how is I know different from I am, right? And I know that I am so and so, right? What's he doing? He's moving it into mind. He's now thinking the I am as a thought. And now it's going to get attributes because it's now in the world of the changing. It's in the mind. I know. So he moves into the mind for his sense of self. And having now the idea of I am rather than the I am, which is silent, he's now got an I am that he's going to add attributes to. You see how he's building his own reality right here. And I know that I am so and so. What does that mean? I'm the owner of the body. Well, that's the very next thing. So he's already moved into the mind, already identified with I know, and I know that I'm so and so. And knowing so that I'm so and so takes you where? It takes you to ownership of body in manifold relations with other owners. So it creates multiplicity. Oh my God, look at this. This is amazing. He's taking us through the whole process of delusion, how we get to our deluded state. We follow this line of thinking exactly, right? Exactly. So it's knowing, it's I aming, but then it's having a thought about the I am, right? And then linking those thoughts to the sense of I am, which then links us to body. Linking ourselves to a body then creates many bodies, a multiplicity of the world. And here we are taking a class on the I am, which is native and natural to us, and we know nothing of it. Why? Because we have piled ourselves 3.5 miles deep in attributes, one after the other, that has got us so worked up about every little thing. And we can't wait for more. You know, the news drove us crazy last night. We can't wait to turn it on again tonight. You know, good Lord, stop it. That's what he's saying. Give it all up. That's how you get ready. That's how you return to your state of knowledge so that you can see the real meaning, the realness of the moment, and throw out all the rest. Right? So I am, of course, but I know also, and I know that I am so and so, the owner of the body, in manifold relationships with other owners, Maharaj. Oof, it is all memory carried over into the now. You're bringing the trash into the house, kid. You're bringing the trash. You've got it backwards. You're supposed to be taking that out and letting it be taken away, letting it fall away. But you're bringing it in the house and you're saving it all up, right? And now you're a hoarder. You're a mental hoarder. And there's no room for the I am up there anymore. You're now sleeping in the hall because you filled your bedroom with trash, right? It is all memory carried over into the now. So you've identified with the past and brought it into the now, and you think it's important. Questioner, I can be certain only of what is now. Okay. If you take that statement right there, I can be certain only of what is now. What is now? How many of your problems are actually in the room with you? You know, how many of them? How many of your relatives are in the room with you? Right? How many of the things that are troubling you are actually in the room with you and are part of this moment without your memory? Almost none. Right? So he's absolutely right, but he's saying it from a completely hypocritical state of being. Right? Because he's not in the now, because he's brought all of his stuff into the room with him. He's brought his entire life into the room with him, his entire past, right? And from that, he's projecting his desires, his entire idea of the future. So he's not in the now. He's not in the room. He's still in his mind. And in his mind, he's got an endless amount of delusional company. You know, it's like inviting all of your most troublesome friends and relatives over to an evening party to play charades. You can be sure there's going to be a horrible argument and the biggest blow up and a big crisis that's going to take at least the next year before the next time you invite them over for charades is going to happen, right? And this is life. This is the cycle of not being ready, not being aware, not discerning, and not knowing who you are, not doing the work to find out what your inner world, how it works, how it's composed. Right? So I can be certain only of what is now. True. Past and past and future, memory and imagination, these are mental states, but they are all I know, and they are now. Okay, do you see, this is exactly what it means to live in the mind. If you live with identified with the mind, then absolutely right. All of these mental states, all the past, all the future, all of your memory, all of your imagination, they are all you know, and they are your now, right? But are they the now? No, they're not here. You can't pick them up. You can't taste them. You can't touch them. You can't put them somewhere. They're not there. They don't have an existence. They are not part of the I am for that very fact. They do not have an existence. How do you know? Because they change, right? Every moment, the crowd is changing. All right. Maharaj, it is all memory carried over into the now. Questioner, I can be certainly only of what is now, past and future, memory, imagination. These are mental states, but they're all I know, and they are now. You are telling me to abandon them. Absolutely. You know, if he was being honest, I don't think he would be telling you to abandon them. He would be jumping all over you, slapping you left and right, saying, "Stop it!" If he thought you were ready to hear like that, he would. That's the good doctor, according to Ramakrishna. Puts his knee on your chest and takes your mouth and holds it open and puts that medicine in. He says, that's the good doctor. The other one just makes a suggestion. Oh, here, take these. You're telling me to abandon them. How does one abandon the now? Ooh, see, he's misunderstood the abandonment. You're not abandoning the now. You can't. You are the now. I am is the now. How do you abandon that? You can't. But you can abandon all the stuff that isn't you, right? And if you can ripen your inside, you know what he's talking about. He's talking about the constant change of mind. Quiet it out by removing your identity with it. The constant change of body. Remove your attention from it. It goes away. They aren't real. They're going to fall off someday. Maharaj, you are moving into the future all the time, whether you like it or not. Questioner, I'm moving from now into now. I do not move at all. Oof, see, this is the danger. This is what happens when you do Vedanta without practice. This is what happens when you read high Vedanta with no renunciation and with no discernment. All right, you get all kinds of confusing. Right. This is I saw a website the other day where people are leaving their enlightenment stories when they became enlightened. All you have to do is watch that and you're like, okay, this is the danger of not having a deep regular practice. We get in another deluded state, and this one is even harder to get rid of because because we think it's true from the real perspective, from the spiritual perspective. We don't realize that we've just mixed a new salad dressing called Advaita into our salad of confusion, and now we're eating it thinking it's real, but it's just more confusion. Right? I'm moving from now into now. I do not move at all. Everything else moves, not me. Okay. Yeah. Do you see the problem? He's got the words, he's got the ideas, but he doesn't know what he's talking about because his other questions betray that. If he knows that the things that are moving are not him, then why did he bring in all of that stuff and define it as the now? He has no idea. He's not doing his practice. He's not discerning. He's not watching his inner world. And so he's turned his whole experience into mush here. So Maharaj says, granted, of course, those are the ultimate truth. Absolutely. But if you believed it at all, you wouldn't be here asking me questions. All right. But your mind does move. In the now, you are both the movable and the immovable. So far, you took yourself to be the movable and overlooked the immovable. Turn your mind inside out. Overlook the movable, and you will find yourself to be the ever-present, changeless reality, inexpressible, but solid like a rock. That inner peace, the way that I've started thinking about that is when I thought of the I am, it was always a thought of me that I was thinking about. It was always like, oh, that's what it is. But I've learned that the I am, another way of looking at it, a working ideal, let's put it that way, for getting to the actual presence with freedom. On your way there, you say, well, I'm going to identify with silence. I'm going to say that my nature is silence, right? And so when I ask myself who I am, you can't say I'm silence because that's making noise. So what can you say? You can say nothing. You can be silence. And I found that to be very, very, very helpful. How does silence react? Silence doesn't react. So you shouldn't react. What disturbs silence? Nothing can disturb silence. Something can exist in silence. Silence is what allows for noise, but the silence is primary. It can't be done away with. It can hold noise for a while, but it always returns to itself. So if you identify with silence as a working tool, silence we understand, silence we can think about, silence can exist in here and here simultaneously. So it's a little bit of a helpful link, right? And then think about that silence. What is that silence? It's what makes room for everything else, right? And everything else that's within that silence happens within the silence. So you become aware of a lot of the teachings about the nature of self, but you have something that you're very familiar with. You don't have to talk about Brahman. You don't have to talk about the absolute unchanging. Just talk about the peace. Talk about the silence that is you are, and start identifying with it. So when you're in the middle of a heated argument, let the thought of I'm silence arise, right? And be silence for a moment. It's very helpful. When lust arises, just be silence for a moment. Stop being a body, which has all of the ingredients that lead to lust. Be silence and observe. What's there to look at in silence? Nothing. There's an awareness of everything in silence. So be that silent. So he says, granted, but your mind does move. So don't identify with it. Why? Because Thakur says anything that changes is unreal. So yes, your thoughts are unreal. They change. In the now, you are both the movable and the immovable, right? That's the ultimate reality. That's getting to the rooftop, like Ramakrishna says, and realizing that the roof is made of the same materials as the stairs that got you there. So it's a pretty high thought. But basically what he's saying is it's like the dream, right? The dream, yes, it's all there. But the I am of the dream is two things. It's the character in the dream, because it's identified with a particular point of perspective, and it's the whole dream, because you're the dreamer. So when you're dreaming, you are both. You are both Shakti and Shiva. Shiva is the sleeper, who's unchanging and unaffected by the dream. But that Shiva has identified itself with a particular and stepped into the dream, has become part of Shakti, has become the divine mother. So that self, when it's dreaming and identifies itself as being in the dream, that is Shakti, or that's the perspective of constant change, right? But simultaneously, it is still 100% the dreamer. So it's both at the same time. That's what he's saying here. Granted, the mind does move. You in the now, you're both the immovable, the dreamer, and the movable, the character in the dream, the point of perspective. Turn your mind inside out. Overlook the movable. Forget the dream for a moment, right? Forget the changing. Forget the perspective, the artificial perspective of being in the dream. Turn it inside out, which means what? Understand that you're not in the dream, that the dream is in you. That's change. That's the switching it inside out. So dream, but be aware of the dream. Be aware that you're dreaming. And then you turn it inside out. I am not in Alameda. Alameda is in me, right? Vivekananda's famous statement. I am not in this dream. This dream is in me. Turn it inside out. So far, you took yourself to be the movable, and you've overlooked the immovable, because the immovable doesn't get your attention. It's not flashing. It's not dancing. It's not beautiful. It doesn't have attributes. It is all attributes. Turn your mind inside out, overlook the movable, don't be carried away by the dream, and you'll find yourself to be ever present. Right? And what does it mean to be ever present? You're omnipresent. You are presence itself. So everything that exists is you. So now, knowing that the dream is in you, look at the dream and see that you have become it all. You, the dreamer, is the creator of the reality that you're experiencing in the dream. And everything that you've created in that dream is what you're experiencing. Very interesting. Overlook the movable, and you will find yourself to be ever present, changeless, because nothing in the dream is actually doing anything to the dreamer. He's just observing it. The changeless reality, inexpressible. What does the dreamer have to say about itself? It's nothing. It's just sleeping. It's just is. It's still, absolutely still, right? Just letting all this stuff happen within itself, but being unaffected by it, but solid like a rock. Without that dreamer, there's nothing. Without that dreamer, there's nothing. Questioner. Questioner. If it is now, why am I not aware of it? Well, it's a very good point. You are aware of it. You're just not paying attention to it. Right? You're aware of many things right now. Think of your big toe right now. Everybody think of your big toe. Don't look at it, but can you feel it? Now, yeah, you know, if you can't feel it, move it. If you can feel it, just focus on it. It has a feeling, it has a presence. That didn't just appear, right? That it wasn't not there and now it's there. The sensation of your big toe has always been there. You just weren't paying attention to it. You didn't move your attention onto your big toe, and so you were unaware of your big toe, right? Think of the top of your head. It's the same. Think of whatever you want to think of. Move your attention to something that it wasn't on. Suddenly that thing is front and center. It didn't just appear. It's always been there. You just had never placed it within your awareness. This is spiritual practice, right? Think of the unchanging self. Now that takes a little bit of work because you've when you say the word self, you immediately think of the thought of yourself, which has a body and a mind and attributes. But go before the thought. What are you when you're not thinking? What are you when nothing is telling you what you are? Right? What are you when there are no thoughts? You are the potential of all thought, the potential of all possible futures, the sum total of all possible pasts, right? And you're silent. There's nothing changing. And so place your awareness there, and life will radically change. Live the dream with the knowledge of you as the dreamer and not the dreamed. And suddenly there is no fear in that dream. There is nothing to be accomplished in that dream. The dream becomes pure expression. And then you can do with it what you want. Dream what you want. See it how you want. Change it in real time. Just like Jesus says, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, throw yourself into the sea. And verily, I tell you the truth, it will throw itself into the sea. When you come to know that you are not the dreamed, but that you are the dreamer, and you come to know that you live in a mind, not in a material world, things become as you express them. Not as a miracle, but as the nature of reality. It gets big fast. It gets crazy fast. But that's only because we're so accustomed to limiting ourselves to the person in the dream, to the point of perspective within the dream, forgetting always that we are the dream, right? Because you hold on to the idea that you are not aware of it, let go of that idea, right? Be aware of it. It's not that it wasn't there and it is now, it's that you weren't aware of it. Just know that. It does not make me aware. Well, that's true, because nothing makes you aware. It's the effect that has no cause. It's your I am. It's given. It's outside of time. It's outside of causation, right? It's outside of space. So that I am. You can't make it. So you can't be made aware. You are awareness itself. Maharaj, wait. You want to be on both sides of the wall at the same time. You can, but you must remove the wall or realize that the wall and both sides of it are one single space to which no idea like here or there applies. Right? In the dream, if you remove that perspective of the dreamer, of the dream, of the dreamed, the point of perspective in the dream, there's no reason for it to be there, because the dreamer is equally everything in the dream. He's created everything in that dream and just arbitrarily created a point of perspective from which to experience the dream. Remove that point of perspective, there's no boundaries. There's nothing outside or inside. There's just isness, right? Things cease being objects when there's not a particular point of perspective selected. He says you want to be, and that's what you want. You can, but you have to remove the wall or realize that the wall and both sides of it are one single space to which no idea like here or there applies. Right? The I am doesn't have a particular. It's the same way of saying it has all particulars. There were a few weeks ago in this class, we read that. He said, the problem, identifying with your body is not the problem. He says, the problem is that you only identify with one body. You don't identify with all bodies. That's the problem. You don't see that it's the same I am. It's the same dreamer that is manifesting every body. And you are equally every other body. So your problem isn't that you're attached to your body. The problem is that you've only attached to one body as being you. All right. Questioner. Let's see what time are we looking at? Yeah. Questioner. Similes prove nothing. Okay. So he thinks that he's talking about similes, right? He doesn't understand that Sri Nisargadatta is talking to something very real. He's not making metaphors and similes and abstractions. He's trying to get you to stop making similes, abstractions, and metaphors. He's like, no. Get rid of all that stuff. Get rid of the thoughts of and the thoughts about and come into be for a moment, right? Come into the moment where there is no thought. There's no identification. There's just isness. Come there for a moment. It's not a simile. It's not a metaphor. It's not a parable. It's you. It's isness. But the questioner says, similes prove nothing. My only complaint is this. Why do I not see what you see? Why your words do not sound true in my mind? Let me know this much. All else can wait. You are wise and I am stupid. You see, I don't. Where and how shall I find my wisdom? You can't find your wisdom. You are that wisdom, right? Satchitananda. You are that wisdom, that intelligence, right? You are that. Maharaj, if you know yourself to be stupid, you are not stupid at all, right? If you know that you're not, that what you're saying is not true, that's not stupidity at all. Just believe what you're saying. Don't tell me you're stupid and then listen to yourself before you listen to me. That's not being stupid. That's being stubborn, right? So yes, we in our ego self, absolutely stupid. Not because we're not intelligent, but because we've identified with a very small subset of attributes that are possible. We've believed in something that exists for a split second and then is changed and different. Know that that's the case. Yes, you're stupid. But if you know that you're making a mistake, then you won't make it by your nature. Why? Because your nature is intelligent, is intelligence itself. Your nature is being itself, silence, infinite potential in a silent moment that can express anything, right? If you know yourself to be stupid, you are not stupid at all. Questioner, well, just as knowing myself sick does not make me well, so knowing myself foolish cannot make me wise. Well, it can if you're not foolish and if you're not sick, right? That's what makes being sick is significantly more tolerable when you sit there and realize that it's the body that's sick. You're the same you've always been, right? My body is always sick in a way, ever since Ever since the cells started decaying faster than they were being reproduced in this body, it was sick. This body's been dying now for probably what, 20 years? It's been working, it's been moving toward death for 20 years. But have I? No. I remember when I was sitting and for some reason we were driving by a cornfield in Maryland when I was in 8th grade, and I was sitting in the back seat. And at the time, I think 12 years old, and I was looking forward to puberty. I was so excited about all the stuff I'd learned in school that was going to happen to me. I was going to be able to grow a beard. I was like, woo, cool. Couldn't wait for that stuff to happen. And I was sitting there driving through this cornfield, and I was just imagining myself with my new body, with a man's body, no longer this boy's body, right? And in that moment, as I was thinking that, I didn't have any awakening or anything. I was 12 years old, but I at least got a sense that, wow, I'm going to be in a different body, right? That thought occurred to me. Wow, I'm going to be in a different body, a body that looks this way, that has muscles, and hairy and strong, and my voice is going to drop, and all this crazy stuff. That's going to be so cool. I can't wait. And after I became a Vedantan, some 30 years later, I'm looking back at that and I'm thinking, God, I'm still that same person that was sitting in the back of the car, knowing that I was not the boy body, but that I was going to be in a different body. And now I look back and I think, oh boy, you didn't know what you were asking for. You didn't know what you were excited for, because there's a stage after puberty when you're going to watch all that wonderful stuff turn gray and melt, and you're still going to be in there. But to know that you're in there and that you're not that makes being sick very easy. It's going to make death very easy. It's going to make death very interesting. I'm actually fascinated by the idea. I can't wait to see it happen. To be there in my bed, knowing, oh my God, here it goes. What's this going to do? Finally, that which was excited about being in a mature body and then ended up in an old body and now is in a dying body. What happens to me when that body is no longer holding me into anything? What happens when that mind finally shuts? I was going to say shuts the hell up, but I don't think that should be in recording. So everybody ignore that. What's going to be when that mind shuts up? Huh? What's that going to be like? Oh my God. Thank the Lord. The first time in 80, 90 years that thing has shut up finally. It's like getting rid of that dog that sits there barking all the time. Or what it's like when you wake up in the middle of the night because somebody's car alarm is going on, and it goes on and on and on and on, and finally it turns off, and you're just like, oh God. That's death. That's all death is. It's a big giant sigh of relief. That body, which has caused so much trouble for so many years, is finally going to shut up. And that mind, which has just been explosive with moods and constant changes and depressions and anxieties, finally, that nagging thing is just going to shut up. And what will become then? The thing that has always been there but ignored will come to the surface. Finally, in that silence, you're going to know what you are when nothing is telling you. Finally, in that silence, you're going to find the peace that has been there all that time and never been noticed. In that expansion of self, you're going to see the wisdom that is native to the now, because there's no longer a past and a future. That becomes your primary isness. And the expansion of that, of knowing, yes, the dream still exists, but you are all of it, and it can be anything, and is expressed purely from the self. Huge, wonderful, perfect, unconditioned being, unconditioned love, unconditioned wisdom, dependent on nothing, never alone. That's what it will be to know this. All right. Let's stop there for today.